Thank you for attending today's webinar on Meet Your GDPR Commitments and Manage Your SAP Landscape with Attunity. On the call today is myself, and Gilby. I am the SAP Solutions Director in EMEA, and Adrian Brommel, who is our SAP Solutions Architect, and will be providing you with an overview demonstration of the Gold Client Solutions. Okay. Very quickly, so we've introduced ourselves. We're going to go through a very quick Attunity overview, followed by a Gold Client demonstration, and then a live Q&A. Please do provide questions as we go through this. You can provide the questions in the dialog box as part of the portal. Okay, so kicking off, who are Attunity? Attunity are a global organization based out of Burlington in Massachusetts in the United States, with an EMEA head office just outside London in Chertsey, and offices also in France and in Germany. We are a global software company, and we are growing about 30% year on year. And we have customers in some 65 countries. I think it's over about 3,000 customers now. And a large number of those customers are in the Fortune top 50 companies. Here are some examples of Gold Client customers that trust Attunity and use the Gold Client solutions for data subsetting, landscape management, and also to meet their GDPR commitments. So, why do customers need Gold Client? There are three main use cases that we come across. The first one is all around the ability to provide non-production data to development, testing, QA, and training teams. This is a difficult task with standard SAP in that you have to do full production copies. It leads to significant downtime, a lot of BDLS work, absorption of resources, and an increasing cost to the business, both in terms of the time it takes to do the full production copies, and also in the absorption of those resources and the non-production, or rather the non-availability of the non-production environments. The second use case is that once you've done a full production copy, yes, you have brand new, shiny, easy to use transactional data, which is available to you for testing, development, and QA purposes, but that transactional data gets used up very, very quickly, which leads to a downward spiral in terms of efficiency of your development and QA, because you then have to create the data. And also, you then have to wait for the next full refresh to get the data that you need. And that, again, is a cost to the business. The third use case, which is the one that we're discussing really today, is all around GDPR. And we will come on to that. So what is Gold Client? Gold Client is a tool that is written app, exists in its own namespace, and installs directly into your source and your target systems. It is a tool that is designed to remove the need to do full production copies, remove the need to have any downtime in your source or target systems, and to provide data to the business, or rather real, relevant, and reliable subsets of the data in your production systems to the business for the purposes of development, testing, training, and it's designed to be on demand. So the functional teams can pull the data they need when they need it. It is a certified solution by SAP, and it runs on NetWeaver, HANA, and HANA S4, and manages all the components on the right-hand side. Not only that, we also have the ability to build in additional capabilities of the Gold Client solution to meet any solutions that you might have. A good example of that is the VizTex solution, or GRC. We have one customer market, IHS Market, who have GRC, and they required to add that into the configuration of Gold Client for their environment, which we did in 2 days. So what are the main features of Gold Client? Well, we have the ability to copy any data from your production system using two main methods. The first one is data snap, which is business process driven. By this, I mean if you had, let's say, as an example, a development project in your sales SD area of SAP, you can go into data snap and say, give me all of the open undelivered sales orders from last week. You don't need to build any scenarios to do this. It is all data driven. So you would simply go into data snap, enter the two dates and a status code of undelivered. Gold Client will go to your production system. It will read the data from your production system, write it to a flat file that's compressed 24:1 and import it into your non-production system ready for use. Because we use direct table exports and imports, the data that is exported from your production system is an exact copy of the data that exists in your production system, i.e. in your non-prod environment, it will have the same posting date, the same document number, and the same currency codes, etc. The other thing to note is that data snap is sophisticated enough to be able to copy a single document. Why is this important? Take, for instance, a support case where a user phones up and says, I've got a problem with sales order 1001. You can go into data snap, copy sales order 1001 directly from your production system to your non-prod environment and be confident it looks exactly the same as it is in your production environment. Obviously, it doesn't just copy sales order 1001, it copies all of the associated transactions with that sales order, all the pick, pack, ship transactions, all of the financial transactions, so you can drill up, drill down, and drill through it exactly like you would in your production environment. Another key benefit is we refresh all the master data with the information or the data slice, or sorry, data snap that we pull across. Okay. The second way of moving data is an intelligent slice. This takes a slice of data across your entire SAP estate. So you might say, I want all of last quarter's data. You go into intelligent slice, you enter the start date and the end date, and Gold Client will go away and export all of the data in your SAP environment across those two dates. Again, we refresh all the master data, and it should be noted that all of the selection parameters in both Data Snap and Intelligent Slice are fully configurable, and we have the ability to synchronize the data extraction between ECC, CRM, and SRM. So you can use the parameters that you export data from ECC to export the same and related data in both CRM and SRM. Okay, GDPR compliance. We all know that GDPR is coming very, very quickly now on the 25th of May, and it is a new law that is designed to ensure that personal data is protected. So the appropriate security must be shown against protection of unauthorized or unlawful processing of personalized data. The fines are significant, as we know, and it applies to any data that allows you to identify an individual. So for telecoms companies, that includes things like IP address now. And you must be able to show not only that you can comply, but also how you can comply. Okay, so what is considered a breach? It's actually very, very simple. The breach is considered to be unauthorized disclosure or access to personalized data. So really quite simple, the statement for the breach, but the impact that has on the business is really very, very significant. Okay, so how do we support GDPR? Well, there are two main tools for doing that. The first one is the ability to delete data, which supports the right to be forgotten. Gold Client has the capability of deleting specific transactional and master data accurately and completely from your non-production systems. So if a customer phones in that hasn't done any business with you for quite some time and says, I would like to be forgotten, instead of having to refresh all of your non-production environments, you can simply delete them from those non-production environments. And it will delete all data related to that customer. The other thing that we can do is full data scrambling. Gold Client has the ability to scramble any field in SAP. The scrambling rules are fully configurable. It comes with out-the-box standard scrambling rules, which you can change or add to. We scramble the data on export, and because we do export once, import many, it doesn't matter where you import that file, the export file into, the data will always be scrambled in exactly the same way. And this is also quite important. We can scramble consistently between ECC, CRM, and SRM, as is the example there shown, which is the scrambling of a customer called Univar Chemicals to Acme Industries in both the target ECC system and the target CRM system. Finally, should we be unable to scramble against the parameters that you require, you can in fact write your own user exit and write your own scrambling code in ABAP and call it from within Gold Client. So we, generally speaking, handle all customers' requirements. So Gold Client can anonymize any data. The data is anonymized on export, meaning that the file that you import, no matter where you import it into, will always be scrambled. You can make the anonymization rules mandatory. By this, what this means is that a user, a functional consultant that logs into the system does not have to worry about ensuring that the data they're going to export will meet the GDPR commitments. Because the anonymization rules are mandatory, they will fire automatically based upon the selection criteria that the user selects, because it is firing against a table and or a field. The rules are configurable, flexible, and you can have a user exit to cover all of your requirements. The anonymized data, and again, this is very important, cannot be reverse engineered. The only way of seeing what the original data is would be to stand up two systems, your production system and your non-production system, side by side with the same information on screen. That is the only way that you could actually track back to the original data. The anonymized data, as I said, can be synchronized across ECC, CRM, and SRM, and this maintains the consistency of the data that we provide. The segregation of duties is usually very, very important for aerospace and defense companies, but also helps for GDPR compliance. And by this we mean using the security object of Gold Client, you can ensure that the person that creates the export is not the same person that does the import. So you can have a checkpoint between the export and the import to ensure that the data meets your commitments. And finally, the data deletion enables the right to be forgotten. And just before I hand over to Adrian, a very quick, shameless piece of self-advertising. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Adrian to do the demonstration.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to take you through a live demonstration of the software. The intention is to pull out the GDPR, the processes, the compliance aspects, showing you how you can select your data, anonymize it, transfer it to a target system. So with Gold Client, it will allow you to move data from a productive to a non-productive system, or a non-productive to a non-productive environment. It's very quick and easy to install. We simply send you a handful of transports. You install them into your source and your target's SAP systems, and then you're good to go. So there's no third-party software, no third-party hardware or anything required. I'm not going to take you through all of the key features and capability of the Gold Client solution. As Adam has alluded to, it's more than just a GDPR compliance tool, but that's one of the key elements that we're able to support as one of the 10 documented business cases that we have for the Gold Client solution. The left-hand side of the screen is very much for the basis team. The expectation and intent here is that they're able to create a new client or refresh an existing client. So copying over the configuration, copying over the master data, being able to compare a source and a target client to understand, are there any differences? Is that going to cause an impact as part of any training, testing, or development processes? And should they need to do so, they have the ability to accelerate standing up a brand new SAP system from scratch. Every basis manager likes to go home on a Friday night like everybody else, so we have our own automation tool that will allow them to select the activities they want to do, to schedule those jobs, to run them and monitor them through to conclusion. We're going to focus the rest of the live demonstration on the middle part of the screen. This is where the functional teams are enabled to come in to be able to select the data that they want to copy and use for training, testing and development. It's obviously key as part of the GDPR compliance that the data they select can be anonymized and scrambled so that once it lands in a target environment, it's desensitized and it's safe for them to be able to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through how those individuals select the data that they want to copy, make sure it's complete, but then prove that once the data is moved, it is also scrambled. And then having seen that, we'll go and have a look at how the transformation rules were put together in the first place and how they can be then defined so that they run automatically against the data types that you want to move. That way it guarantees that the GDPR is compliant. You can set up the rules, you can have them validated by your auditors so that you know the controls that you're going to be monitored against, and then you just simply carry on life as usual, safe in the knowledge that all of your sensitive data can be scrambled as required. Data snap is the first part. We're going to start here. And what we have provided you as standard out of the box is a number of data types. So it's really easy for you to select the data that you need to move from a source to a target system. So it really doesn't matter whether you're looking to copy iDocs, whether you're looking to copy text, or whether you want to come down into the HR area and select individual personnel records and then the payroll postings that go with those and copy those from the source to the target. You can see that the SAP data model is complete, and I'm going to select simply sales documents for an example now. The way that you validate that the data is going to be complete, that you select that you want to desensitize, is simply working off the data model that we have created for you within Gold Client. We've pulled together all of the tables for a particular area. So here you can see all of the sales order tables. The sales order header links to the sales order line item based on the sales document number. So again, this is all pre-built standard for you, so you don't need to worry about this. The part that will come into play that you need to think about is how you're going to cope with all of the custom tables that exist in your SAP environment, and do they have any sensitive data that you need to anonymize. Gold Client comes complete with a utility that allows you to identify those custom tables, and having identified those tables, it looks to see is there a field in that table that's common with the selection criteria and standard SAP table field combinations. Where that is the case, it's a simple tick box and then a post to save it, and that allows you to automatically or near automatically pull together the linking of the data between your custom SAP areas and the standard SAP areas. Not every SAP developer is given a spec or even sticks to a script when they're building a specification and a solution. What that means is that you could end up with having orphaned connections. Gold Client will identify these for you. It then allows you to go through and to select those and manually assign them to a particular part of the Gold Client data model. The next important thing here that we provide, again, this is standard out of the box and you validate it as part of the implementation, is the document flow. You want to know that when you're selecting a particular customer, you're going to identify all of the sales orders that they had. We can then go through, pick up all of the line items, the contracts, the billing documents, the deliveries, and all of the master data that was associated with that particular customer or that particular individual. Or even from a HR perspective, all of the timesheets, the expenses, and the performance development data that exists within your SAP environment. So having that document flow is key to being able to identify the documents in SAP. So as part of the implementation, what we ask you to do is to come with some of the complex scenarios. We will then show your users how to select the data that they want to copy that data, see it land in the target, and the data is then scrambled or anonymized to your requirements. It's very simple for them to select the data that they want. It's a simple field and table drop down. Again, it's all driven off the configuration here, so we're prompting them with the appropriate tables and selection criteria. Again, that's something that you don't typically need to come into. Once the solution is set up, it's basically then good to go from that perspective. So let's select, for example, one particular sales order. If I wanted to, what I could do is I could come in and I could select one particular sales order, or if I wanted to, I could come in and select a whole host of sales orders relating to a particular individual that maybe now wants the right to be forgotten or be deleted from our target SAP system. I can come in and show the count. That then gives me an idea of how many records are existing in my SAP system. This is just a standard IDES demo environment, so I've only got 17 sales orders for this particular individual. We're going to, just for the sake of argument, copy the one from the source to the target system. What we can do is we can specify a target environment. So we're going to select an RFC destination, and we're going to push that data from the source over into the target. We're going to schedule this to run using standard SAP scheduling, accept that, and the job is going to run. While that's running, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that my target environment, a different color, so it's nice and easy to see where I am and what I'm doing, has got no data in it relating to that particular customer. So I've done that for a reason, because I want to see what Gold Client copies, what it scrambles, and also why it's important and how we move the data. Whenever we move the data, what we do is we go in and we read the data that the user has selected. We pull that data from the underlying SAP database. We apply the scrambling, the data transformation rules. We'll have a look at in just a second. And then what we do is we write that data to a compressed export file. That compressed export file is then stored in your shared file server, typically a subfolder of SAP Trans. And that means that that file can be imported into any connected SAP target client that you require. It can be imported in one time, it can be imported, deleted, and re-imported many times. So if you're wanting to do iterative or repetitive testing for like hot packs, or maybe you want to run a training course, import that desensitized data, use it, re-import it again, and the document numbers that you're copying in will all be the same, as will the scrambled names of the employees, the sales orders, the credit card information, and so on. All of that will be safely anonymized. The import options allow us to check whether the data exists in the target system as well. If it does, you have the option to overwrite that data or choose not to import that data. Again, it's giving you the flexibility. So maybe you're wanting to copy data from a productive system to a non-productive system. If you're using a standard SAP copying tool, you can copy that data across, but that typically won't apply any scrambling against that. Gold Client allows you to scramble data copying from production to non-production, but also if you have just done a full system copy with standard SAP tools, we can copy that data in situ in the target client. So we copy that off to a compressed export file, the data's been scrambled, and we can then copy that back into your target client. So that way, once the data has been imported, you know that it's safe, it's all anonymized, and it's good for your functional teams to use and carry on business as usual. IBM, they came to us. They wanted a further restriction as part of their control processes that ensures that the files that are generated from the German company code for the HR system cannot be opened in a French target system and client ID combination. And therefore, by specifying that, you can force that only certain files can be opened in certain client environments. What you'll notice, and based on that, is each of the buttons on the Gold Client screens and the initial screen are tied to our own authorization object. The key importance for that is, as part of your GDPR compliance, is you want to make sure that when people are moving the data, scrambling the data, that they have the right to be able to do that, that you then have complete control over the segregation of duties and who does what as part of that transfer and import process. Adam kindly mentioned that we have a subset sync capability. We're looking at a sales order here, so we can automatically link to CRM. If you're anonymizing information relating to a customer, we can scramble the equivalent fields in CRM automatically, and therefore allow you to do full end-to-end testing, safe that the data has been scrambled accordingly in both SAP modules. What we'll see here is that the data transformation rules are set up as rules. They've been assigned as defaults against particular data types. And what that means is on export, the finance documents, so the credit card information, the material masters, the customer information, is all going to be taken care of as part of that. So what we can also see here is based on my current authorization capability, I do have the ability to turn off those scrambling rules as part of the transformation process. Now, GDPR compliance requires that the rules are set as default, and therefore what you'll need to do is to define as compensating controls the ability for the user to have access to turn off the scrambling rules at the point of export. There might be a time as part of resolving a business as usual production support issue that you want to go through and you want to make that available. What we'll notice now is that the data has been copied over into my target system. I can see that I have one entry come through. It's very easy to go and find that entry. I go to the sales order display. It's the same number that I selected. So whilst Gold Client is capable of scrambling or anonymizing every single field in the SAP system, what we recommend is that you leave certain primary key fields as they are. That then allows you to maintain the integrity of the document flow and the ability of Gold Client and SAP to find the full document flow for copying that data from a source over to a target environment. So what we can see here is that all of the fields have been brought across exactly as they are in the source system. The exception here is for the value of the description. I've changed that from a steel pump to a fixed value as being transformed. We also have copied here, and this is key, maintaining the linkages between the sales order and the other data in your source SAP system, or maybe an employee HR records and their payroll and expenses and so on. We can pick up the other documents, so the delivery, goods issue, the accounting document, and we can drill into any or all of those documents. All of the values, all of the fields are complete, and if they've been selected for scrambling, those values would have been scrambled, stored in the export file, and then imported into this target environment. Once I've finished with the data, what I can do is I can go to the Gold Client cockpit. This will be in my target environment, and I can delete that data. Maybe I've used it to resolve a production support issue. Maybe the data was scrambled, maybe it wasn't, but I can still go through and delete this data. Maybe I've run a training course and I want to remove it, or maybe I've done hot pack testing, I've reapplied some transports and I want to retest that. So I can simply select the file that I want and I can execute and remove that file. First, what I want to show you is that by running a simple sizing report, gives you an idea of the data that we selected and copied as part of that export. So we found bills of materials, profitability analysis documents, material master records, customer master records, and so on. So based on the Gold Client configuration, the linkages, we're able to select and mine through your SAP system to pick up all the data that relates to a particular object that you're going to want to scramble to meet your GDPR compliance requirements. So having selected that, I can simply remove that data, and within a couple of seconds, that's gone from the environment. But what you'll notice is the file still exists unless I choose to delete it and free up the space in the shared file drive. What that allows me to do is I can go back to my import control. This time, I'm not pushing it into my target. I'm already logged into my target, and I want to re-import the same file again. This time I can execute this in foreground or background, and I can overwrite or not overwrite those transactions should I wish to do so. So again, it's allowing me to repeatedly use scrambled data so that therefore I'm happy that everything I'm going to see is decentralized in my target environment. There's two ways that a user might want to copy data. We've seen that data snap can be very granular, the way that you select data based on an employee record or a purchase order or a sales order. We also have intelligent slice. Intelligent slice will allow you to select data based on a wider range. So whether it be a time slice, So we could choose a time frame, a from and a to, importantly. Sometimes you might want to go back to a specific period. We can also pick then any combination of organizational objects in our SAP system. So I can choose company code, I can choose personnel number, and identify all of the data that I need to. When I execute this, I'm going to be able to further select subsets of master data and or transaction data types, and therefore I can be comfortable that I'm picking up everything associated with the objects that I want to scramble as part of my GDPR compliance. The reason for showing you this is also to show you that at the time that we do this, we're going to create a new export file with a different set of containers, so one for each of the data types that we are wanting to copy from the source to the target. When we look at these files, you'll see that Gold Client is a light touch. So yes, it's one thing to select the data, but we want a light touch, so we can always go and read the data from the source, write it to a compressed export file, and then import that into our target environment, ensuring that there is no downtime, there's no table locking, there's no having the users to wait inordinate amounts of time to be able to get the data that they want to use for training, testing, and development purposes. Here we can see that those 28 containers, one for each piece of data type, are set to a job. They will run sequentially one after the other. That way it allows us to maximize the use of the background jobs that the basis team allow Gold Client to use. And we can then see here the number of records that will be picked up. Is this all of the data that we need from our system? Do we need more for testing maybe? Fixed assets, the asset team will have no master data. We can come in and we can change purely that original attribute against that particular data type. If that's going to give us a wider selection by going back 5 years, we can now come forward and we can select a different field category that will restrict that data so that we're picking up the amount of data that we feel is important for whatever activity it is that we're trying to do. So we're now going to have 102 asset records when I refresh the button. So the record count will change, the other jobs will run appropriately, and we can see that these have now run. They've picked up a number of records, and importantly I can see which sets of data are going to be transformed. Therefore, as a validation, as a spot check, I can look back here and see maybe the vendor master data should have some transformation against that. I can come up here, and if it's not already set, I can come in and I can apply and change the rule against the vendor masters. So here I can see that it's missing, so I really need to go and set that as a default rule in that scenario. Again, if I'm given the appropriate authorization, I can come in and I can turn off the forcing of those transformation rules. Again, it's down to you to work with your auditors to meet that compliance requirement internally, should you have that feature enabled within Gold Client. The other benefit of having these export files created is we can run them at any point in time. So I ran that for 2010, January to March. I can now set this and forget this as an automated job to run and pick up data for the last 7 days. Jim Beam, one of our customers, used this feature. They do a full system copy at the start of the year and then use Gold Client to copy every week the new documents that are created and changed in their SAP system. That way their functional teams always have the data that they want, and they can also ensure that the scrambling rules have been applied so that the data is desensitized. So we've talked about the rules and seen how they're applied and why we apply them. And we apply them because when we copy the data off the system, we want to scramble the data at that point. Again, that's a GDPR requirement, so that whenever that data file is used or imported, the data has been desensitized. So our transformation rules enable the setup and the ability to assign those as a default against the data. We do provide you a number of standard transformation rules out of the box. A GDPR compliance is partly down for your interpretation. What we've done with our transformation rules is we have taken the common fields that our customers and prospects have been requesting, and we've brought these together as groups. You can obviously create your own groups either from scratch, or you can copy our rules and then add and amend fields as you see fit. In this instance, for HR, what we have pulled together is a number of HR tables, and then within a table, what we've done is we've chosen the fields that we want to scramble. Goal Client's very flexible, and you can apply one of 6 transformation rules to each of the fields within your SAP system. We can see here, for example, that complete name is derived. So here we can see it's derived. It's made up of going to table PA0002, selecting the first name and the surname field. We'll concatenate those, put a space between them, and then store that in the complete name field. You'll notice looking down here that first name and surname are maintained from a list. So you maintain your list of values. So your first name, you've come in here, you've created a number of default first names, and what Goal Client will do is come and get a value at random from this list and then store that in the first name and surname field accordingly. We then pick this up and we derive it into the complete name. So again, it's allowing you to anonymize data and then use that data within your SAP environment to populate other fields. The flexibility of Goal Client also allows you to decide what happens with data in the fields. Sometimes you may not want that data to be copied across, so you can simply select blank, and what that means is that when the data is selected by the user, it's copied, the data is removed from that field prior to that file being stored. And therefore, whenever you open that file in the target, there is no data for that field. Fixed values are perfect for putting in dummy IBAN numbers, dummy email addresses, or even fixing a 100,000 salary against an employee. So it's easy to work out what the social security contributions and tax and so on should be against that individual. We've seen that we can maintain a list and select up numbers, dates, and so on. So it's all very what's capable. In 99% of cases, it's efficient, and so for defense customers like Thales in France and Northrop Grumman in the US and the American Army and Navy, they're quite happy that the standard Goal Client capabilities allow them to meet their compliance rules. Mentor Graphics also bought Goal Client to meet the US and EU Safe Harbor agreements and are doing exactly the same to ensure that their Goal Client solution is meeting their GDPR compliance for the data that they need to hold in the EMEA region. So again, having set these up, these rules, you simply need to define them as a default against the particular data types. And that means whether you're copying them as part of a transaction flow, like the sales order or a time slice, or whether you're copying them as part of creating a client where you're copying over purely master data, we can scramble that data, be it master data or transaction data, according to your requirements. Again, it's a solution that you can enable to work for you. So having set that up, there is the audit capability. As Adam said, there's a number of caveats if you want to switch this on. So in a target environment, there is no way that you can decode or analyze or understand what was the before, what was the after capability of Goal Client with regard to the data that it scrambled. If you have the appropriate authorization, you can then turn on the auditing function within the Goal Client solution. If you turn it on, you will then be able to run a data snap extraction after that. If you have the appropriate authorization to an SAP productive system, if you have access to the reports within that productive environment, you will be able to see the before and the after snapshot. We designed that into the solution. It was a requirement of the US Navy that they wanted that capability. But as you've noticed, there were 4 ifs. There's 4 ways that you can control that a user has and has to have only active access to the productive environment if you want a hope of trying to understand what the before and the after scrambled fields were. What I've noticed in the number of years that I've been demonstrating this solution is that we haven't had any other customers who've actually wanted to be able to descramble or decrypt what is the scrambling rules that have been applied against the data in your SAP systems. Quickly, just to wrap up, as I have a couple of extra minutes, we have our event scheduling tool, as I said. This is great for the basis team. The idea if they want to copy data from client 800 to 200, they have a list of the jobs that are required. So they can copy over the master data. They can refresh a client should they need to do so. They can also then copy subsets of the transaction data that the functional teams want to use. It's simply SAP scheduling and job monitoring, so it's nothing new that they need to learn. To implement and get this solution up and running is very quick. It's about a week for an ECC environment. Having got that, client 200 is my target. So again, we can delete the data once it's in the system, if it's already there from maybe prior testing or whatever. Import the master data and the configuration should you need to do so. Import the transaction data. And as Adam kindly said, there is no BDLS transaction processing requirement. So that's going to save you an awful lot of time and downtime. The post-processing activities relate purely to the fact that we're typically copying subsets of data from a source to a target system. We're wanting to make sure that your finance and controlling totals tables are adding up to the sum of the line items, and therefore we just go and recalculate those. If you're storing text and want to read that, we need to reassign the client number relating to that text so that it's visible, or very simple. And our number range utility allows us to bump up the number ranges in your target environment so the next available number is higher. What that does is it allows you a buffer so that in the coming weeks and months you can still copy live business transactions that have been created in your productive environment, copy those into your target QA and development environments so that there are no conflicting data when you're importing that data. So again, all very simple, all very easy. So to wrap up the GDPR compliance, you need to be able to ensure that the data is scrambled on export. That's exactly what Gold Client does. It allows you to select the data that you want based on the individual transaction or an individual piece of master data, and using the Gold Client linkages, it will pick up all of the associated documentation within the SAP environment. Safe that you're always picking up the appropriate data. You've seen that the rules can be set at an individual field level. You have complete control over that. You can make sure that the rules are set as mandatory, and then if you want to set the authorizations so you can turn those off, you can do, but you'll need to put some compensating controls in place to manage that. So at that point, that concludes the demonstration. So let's open up the floor to questions and answers.
Okay, there are a few. If there are anybody wants to ask any more questions, please do pop those through on the Q&A box. But these are the ones that we have so far. The first question was, will the webinar be available for download later? Answer, yes. Okay, so can we do in situ scrambling?
Yes, we can. The reason I showed the ability to select data and explain the process of copying it off to a file, a compressed file in your shared file space, we're able to do in situ scrambling. So if you've literally done maybe a full system copy, or you've done one recently and you don't want to redo that, you can install Gold Client into your target environment. You can select the data that you want to scramble. That data, when you select it, is copied off to a compressed file and then imported back into that target environment. So effectively, the data is scrambled in situ.
Thank you. Can you link the you can link the exports between ECC and CRM, but can you also do it between two ECC systems and also maintain the scrambling capability?
You need to understand that Gold Client is installed into your ECC environment. As you've got two ECC environments, you will install Gold Client into each of those. We will be running a POC in the next couple of months with a company that has 8 SAP systems. It's key for them to maintain the integrity of the data between those 8 as they all work together to form a completed unit at the end of that. So if you apply the same scrambling rules, as long as you're not randomizing in a particular environment, then yes, we can scramble the data consistently between those two ECC environments.
Okay. Can you scramble after import?
If you use the custom function capability, against the particular fields in SAP, then yes, you can use an ABAPer of yours. They can create a custom function in SM37, and that can be called from the Gold Client Scrambling program. The benefit there is if you prefer to have a scrambling rule activated once you're landing the data in the target, you can do that. If I give you an example, Thales, they came to us, they wanted to be able to scramble the value of a purchase order. We wrote that, they raised that as a help desk ticket. We actually did that as a help desk ticket for them rather than charge them an additional day's consulting. We wrote that as an exit so that when they imported the data, the value was then scrambled at that point. They were happy with that solution, but what we did was we extended that one step further, and this has now been rolled out in the Gold Client solution, is that we were able to scramble those values on export so that you don't then need to run those on import. But the short answer to your question was, yes, we can scramble on import.
Okay. Can you scramble in production?
Today, no. At the end of the month, yes. What we've done is we've taken our scrambling capability. We've been working with SAP to apply the similar program and process for scrambling the data in a productive environment, so effectively to help you achieve the right to be forgotten. The reason that we're working closely with SAP is the Gold Client solution is certified by SAP, and one of the requirements for the certification is that Gold Client does not touch or damage the data in your productive SAP system. So typically we're not able to import data into a productive environment, and we're not allowed to delete data in there. However, we are working with SAP so that they can certify our solution from that perspective on live production data as well.
Okay. How do you handle number ranges?
Number ranges, the recommendation from our side is when you create a client or refresh an existing one, is that you copy over the number ranges from the source over into the target. The reason we ask you to do that is we have a particular utility that's unique to us. It allows us to run it so that in your number ranges in the target environment, we effectively create a buffer. We change the next available number so it's increased by a percentage. What that means is that new documents, so new HR records, payroll postings, and so on in your source, typically your production system, can then be copied into the target environment without those records wanting to overwrite data that already exists in that environment. So effectively, the number range creates a buffer to minimize any problems you may face.
Okay. We have a pre-production environment that we use as the source system for non-production data. Is it possible to keep that pre-prod system up to date?
Yes, it is. That's not uncommon. Certainly companies in a regulated industry or who have a particular sensitive nature and high dependency on their SAP environment, what they tend to do is they tend to have a 4-tier landscape, so development, QA, pre-prod, and then a productive environment. What we recommend that they do there is that, taking the Jim Beam example, is that they will do a full system refresh at the start of the year. Their database isn't huge, so it doesn't take them that long to do. Once that environment's created, you can then use Gold Client to pick up new documents created and documents that have been changed in your source SAP productive environment and copy those over into your pre-production environment. So that gives you a pretty clear representation of your live productive system with all of the latest up-to-date data. What companies like Jim Beam can then do is they can then use their pre-prod environment as the source for providing subsets of data back into development and QA to facilitate unit testing and user acceptance testing, respectively.
Okay, and the final question, can you scramble Z and Y table data?
Yes, you can. You would need to create your own rule or append one of our existing rules for those. You would simply just need to key in the Z table that you wanted to scramble. Within that Z table, you would then be able to select the field, and again, in the same way that you do the standard SAP table and field combination, you would apply the scrambling rule that you think is most pertinent against that particular field. So be it to blank it out, to randomize the numbers in there, or whether you want to apply a custom function or a fixed value.
Okay, and that completes the questions that we've had in. I would just like to say thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Obviously, if you have any questions at all, please do get in touch with us. We'd be delighted to have a conversation. But that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.